Hey guys, welcome to the search for God. So, this is going to be a bit of an unplanned episode because I had two incredible things happen this past weekend that I wanted to discuss. Now, the first one I have to be pretty vague on because obviously it involves real life and real people, but I think I can tell it in a way that I keep it vague enough. And I'm certain if I tell the story even halfway as good as it should be told, it will kind of blow your mind. And hopefully I can do it vague enough and still get across the just how significant and just incredible it is. And then the second story I can get into more details about, and it is even more crazy. So we're going to try to get into both of them, and I think they will really bless you and touch your heart. So let's begin with that first story, and we have to do that because the first story leads to the second story. So I had a situation that had been ongoing, maybe we'll say with some level of stress and anxiety for about 6 months. And every now and then it would ease up a bit, but then maybe go back to a more worrisome situation. And then maybe stabilize a bit, but kind of a gnawing anxiety for about 6 months regarding a certain situation. And in the past 3 weeks, it had grown increasingly bad, I would say. And so I do everything like any good person would do within my power to try to resolve this. I try to give ground, I try to communicate and address it. I try everything that as a human you could do. And by the end of this 3 weeks, it's very clear that all of my efforts have yielded nothing. Maybe it's even worse than it had been. And I am just almost frantic with anxiety and really fear. So by Saturday night of this last weekend, I was pretty much at the breaking point. And I couldn't really sleep. And so by about midnight, just completely almost overwhelmed by anxiety, resentment, anger, all of the normal human emotions to a situation that's outside your control, that you've done everything you can to address. I finally, because I can't sleep and I'm angry and everything else and I'm growing resentful, I finally just pray about it, which in hindsight I feel like an idiot that it took me that long to really pray about it, that for 6 months kind of grew, and that especially for 3 weeks I really tried everything on my own. But I think partly it was I didn't want to seem selfish to have to ask God for this, this help, which is ridiculous looking back at it. But at any rate, so it's about midnight or so. I can't sleep. And I finally do what any rational human who's a Christian should do. I start praying. And I'm like, God, I can't fix this. I've done everything. I'm angry, blah, blah, blah. And I managed to just pray about it and just try to get it off my chest. So this is like around midnight. And thankfully, after praying about it, I get some peace, I fall asleep, and I think that's just kind of the end of it. Well, this is where it gets crazy. So I wake up Sunday morning, and I'm stunned to see that I've gotten some communication back. And the crazy thing is, of course it's the weekend, but the communication came very early. We'll say like 6 a.m. And what's even crazier is that it isn't like the situation is sort of resolved or it's 50-50 or it's meet halfway. It's like everything literally the way I would have desired. Like 100+%. I got everything I could have possibly wanted. Honestly, I got more than I would have even had the nerve to ask for, given where that situation was. So essentially, I finally break down to pray about something around midnight, and the situation is, at least for the moment, totally resolved within 6 hours of me finally letting it go and finally asking for help. And like I said, it's 100 times better than I would have even expected in a best case scenario. So I am just like blown away on that Sunday morning. I'm just so thankful, and we were planning on going to church anyway, like we always do on Sundays. And so I make breakfast, and I'm just still almost like in disbelief that this has happened, that it happened that quickly, that it happened so amazingly in my direction. And so I make breakfast, and I'm praying after once it's ready before we go to eat. And I probably pray a little longer than normal because I'm still just like on cloud nine. And during that prayer, like I'm thanking God for answering this prayer. And I say, if it be your will, if there's anything I can do for the kingdom today, let me do it. I'm just so thankful that you heard my prayer. And it's just a small part that I threw in. It's not something I even pray very often because it's kind of one of those scary prayers. It's one of those you always worry that if you do say it, I mean, honestly, we don't have time in life for it, right? Most of us, because if you say that prayer and someone's got a flat on the side of the road, well, you can't spend 20 minutes or 45 minutes helping someone, or honestly, we're all way too busy. So it's a prayer I don't say a lot, but I threw it in, and with the busyness of just getting to church, going to church, and then afterward, Jamie and my wife, went shopping for about 3 hours. Like I had forgotten I had even prayed it. I had totally forgotten, honestly, that I had even said that little bitty sentence as a part of a pretty normal prayer. So again, by this point, it's like 3 o'clock on Sunday. We've been doing shopping at several different stores, trying to get some of the things on our Christmas list. Things are going really well. And it's been like, I guess, almost 9-10 hours since I'd prayed that original prayer. Like, I honestly had completely forgotten it. And so we go to McAllister's to eat. And, of course, since church, like, neither of us, we'd both consumed a fair amount of liquid. My favorite drink of choice being tea, and I knew I had drank way more tea than she had. And so I'm like, I need to use the restroom. And she's like, well, actually, I was going to go. Do you care to wait? And, of course, even though I knew I'd drank about 2 or 3 times what she had, and I laugh because I don't mean to go into these details, but I have to, because the timing of all of this, it matters. But of course, I'm a gentleman, and despite being quite certain that I had already said 30 minutes earlier I needed to use the restroom when we got to McAllister's, she said, hey, I'm going to go use it. I guess she'd forgotten I said it. And I'm, of course, the perfect gentleman, so I'm like, sure, I'll stay here at the table and watch your stuff. I'll go after you. Of course, she comes back. Well, our food comes really quickly. And so I'm like, well, I'll just wait. And so we eat. And so finally, after all that, I'm like, okay, I've really got to go to the restroom. And so this is where the timing matters. So obviously, I had wanted to use the restroom probably 25, 30 minutes before. And 2 different little things that prevented that from happening, which was my wife wanting to go and the food coming way early, even though the place was pretty packed. But I go back to the restroom, and there's an older lady, probably in her 70s, standing in the hall, like just outside the women's restroom. I think nothing of it. I go into the men's restroom, and there's one gentleman in there in his 70s. He's an older dude. And I quickly notice that he's carrying a cane, like a white walking stick that a blind person carries, which is red on the end. And so he's clearly blind, and he's near the urinal area trying to get away from it to find the sink. And he's clearly someone who's only recently become blind, because he's one of the least, he was just struggling, one of the least competent blind people I've ever seen. And as I'm standing there, and within 5 or 10 seconds, I watch him do, as he's poking the stick around, do 2 360s. And I'm like, sir, do you need help? And he's like, I'm just trying to find the sink, but I've been walking around in here for, a couple of minutes, and I'm struggling. I'm like, well, sure, I can walk you over this. So I walk toward him, and he's got hearing aids in. He can't even really, normally if you help someone who's has some sight issues, I feel like their hearing is just exceptional. Well, this guy can't even find my arm, so I reach forward, I grab his arm, I walk him over, and I'm like, okay, you're right in front of the sink now. And he's like, I'm all good now, thank you. And he goes to find the sink and literally starts turning away from it, and he's getting off track again. And I'm like, here, sir, and I turn him back around, I help him get the water running. He can't find the soap, I help him with that. And then after he finishes, he can't find, of course, the paper towel, so I help him with that. And he's like, I don't know what to do with this. Obviously, I'm like, hey, I'll just grab it. I'll throw it away for you. And then I start to help him head toward the door, and he's getting turned around there. And as he's going toward the door, and he bumps into it, and then so I open it, and I'm like trying to help him, but he keeps getting in my way, and it's kind of awkward, obviously. And I get the door open, and that lady turns, who's now I realize his wife, and she has this huge look of relief, but also this look of, like, you could tell she had been standing there a while and probably worrying. Now, again, I have no idea why, since no one else was in the restroom, she just didn't go help him or something. They clearly weren't used to this kind of a situation. And as he thanks me and the two are leaving, it just, like, hits me. Almost, like, overwhelmingly. Like a wave of almost emotion, but just like that feeling when you know that, like, God is speaking to you. And I realize, oh my word, I had prayed earlier if I can do anything for the kingdom. And then I got to thinking, holy cow, this guy was in the bathroom for a couple of minutes, was getting turned around, needed help. No one was there to help him. For whatever reason, either his wife thought he was using the restroom, or maybe he refused to ask for help. Maybe he was embarrassed. I'm not sure. But he had no help. And then I think about the timing of it all. How I wanted to go to the restroom like 30 minutes earlier, and then my wife needed to go, but then food came fast, which was kind of a little weird, and like how the timing was just perfect, and how a lot of people, and especially when I first walked in, would have probably like not necessarily wanted to help because you're in the restroom with another person and it's kind of awkward. And it just hit me that, like, holy cow, like the timing, like the number of stores we went to, like the number of factors that would have had to line up for me to be there in that time, in that place, to help that guy. And then I think about how he could have been in that restroom, like asking God for help, maybe not wanting to call out to his wife, trying to do it on his own, turning in circles and just not willing to give up, not willing to call for help, but then maybe praying to God, and then bam, I walk in and like his prayers are answered, and I played this really small, minuscule role, but for him it was probably huge. And I'm just like, oh my word. I mean, I'm 47 years old. I don't know that I've ever seen a fully blind person in a restroom in 47 years. It's just weird, the timing, that on that very day that I said, if there's something I can do for the kingdom, let me do it. And then bam, it happened. And then, as if all that isn't enough, I start to feel this almost, I feel just, it felt amazing, don't get me wrong. But as I thought on it later, I felt almost some guilt, because I'm like, how many times have I almost not been willing to pray to help others? Now I have a prayer list, I pray for people with cancer and all this other stuff. But I'm almost half the time afraid to pray to do work for the kingdom that day, because most of the time, let's be real, I don't have a lot of time. I work a full-time job. I have a family. I have a stepson involved in baseball. I'm running around. I'm doing 2 different podcasts. Like, I see this as my ministry. And a lot of times I'm putting a lot of effort into the side things that I'm doing and the books I'm trying to write. And I just don't have a lot of bandwidth. But then I felt almost shame that I haven't asked to do more, and that maybe it's the devil that puts this in our minds, that like, don't ask to do work for the kingdom because you don't have 45 minutes of free time today. Well, maybe it ain't 45 minutes. Maybe it's like 2 minutes helping someone who's scared and desperate in a bathroom and can't see. And so I'm still just trying to process these 2 events. It's now several days later, and I guess I'm struck by several things. First of all, I think I've used this analogy before. If not, I've definitely with my other podcast, and definitely in lots of stories with other people. As I've said before, I hope I've not said it on here, but I think with what happened to me in the first situation, it's the classic story of God is standing in a doorway watching you, a young boy or a young man or a young girl or a young woman, and you got to get a book that's way up on like the 5th shelf, 10 feet high or something crazy, and you can't reach it, so you put a chair there, and then you're starting to stack boxes, and you're starting to climb these boxes precariously, trying to balance and reach and stretch, and you're just reaching, and you finally realize you cannot get it. And as long as you do all of that, God stands in the doorway, and he's proud of you. He knows your work and he knows you're trying to do good, just as I was trying to resolve that situation myself. But once I realized I could not, it was beyond my ability to solve, the very moment I asked for help, faster than I would have expected, better than I would have expected, God rushed across the room and solved that problem. Just like getting the book off the shelf, he literally within hours had my situation handled better than I could have ever handled myself. So that's point one. The second point that hits me is like, why will we not go to him in prayer? I mean, I pray for people that have all kinds of issues. I keep that prayer list. I try to pray on it as often as I can. The goal being daily. Doesn't always happen, but that's definitely the goal. But I often don't pray for myself, and I bet you're the same way. And I have things that, like, from back pain to whatever, where it's like, I just won't. I feel like it's selfish. And in this instance, I just would not do it until it was beyond, obviously, anything I could handle. And then I think, like, I don't know if that's right for us. Like, why won't we ask the Father for help? Why do we wait so long? How silly it must seem to him sometimes that we do wait so long to ask for help. And maybe he doesn't answer every prayer, but I just want to throw out there that maybe we're waiting too long to ask for help on some things. So if you've got something out there that you've been wrestling with for a long time, maybe it's time you ask for help as well. Don't be ashamed to, and don't be completely floored if it happens easier and faster than you ever imagined. I had shared this same two stories with my small group on the Sunday night, and of course I'm bawling because I was still just so into that, everything that had happened, and it was a lot of emotions. And I told them, I'm like, I believe all the miracles. I believe that God parted the Red Sea. I believed that Jesus was raised from the dead. I believe these unbelievable miracles that a lot of people doubt. And yet, why am I hesitant to ask for help? But also, why am I surprised that a God that is that powerful, when you finally ask for help, can resolve a situation that human hands cannot resolve easily? Why would we even be surprised at that? It's nothing. It's like a featherweight task for someone who can split the Red Sea and do all the miracles you read about in the Bible. And it's just funny how we believe in these miracles that happened back then, and we forget the miracles that happen almost daily today. And then the third point was, maybe it's the devil that tells us we don't have time to do kingdom work. Maybe it's the devil that tells us you don't have 45 minutes or 20 minutes to change a tire or help someone go get gas when their vehicle's stuck on the side of the road, or to slow down and help that, scared-looking lady who's about to pump gas at 8:30 at night because you're rushing home, or you got this or that, or whatever that situation is. Maybe it's the devil that keeps us from doing more kingdom work, because sometimes kingdom work doesn't take but 2 or 3 minutes, and it can still be very powerful for someone. I still just can't wrap my arms around how, like, life isn't an accident. The timing of me helping that guy on the day that I had prayed that, I just, like, we think life is random, or the culture tries to teach us that, or it's just fate, or they'll say it's luck or coincidence, just coincidence. No, like, a lot of this, it's not coincidence. It's not even close to coincidence. And as I was telling my small group, just weeping and in tears, like, this isn't an accident. This stuff is real. We get so bogged down in just the monotony of life, in the busyness of life. Sometimes we are just worn down by the boredom of life, or whatever stage of life you're in. We are a part of something so much bigger. We know we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and yet we don't offer ourselves up for that enough. So I guess I should wrap up there on those points, but man, I hope that those two little stories moved something in your heart and blessed you in some way. We know that throughout the Bible, there are often angels that come onto the earth to intercede. Literal angels from heaven. It's documented numerous times throughout the Bible. But we also know that there are parables and stories about the Good Samaritan and how we are supposed to help people. And so we need to be doing our part as well. And I think when we do that, we'll be blessed for doing that. And so speaking just for myself, I'm going to do my best to try to offer myself up for more work in the kingdom. And I'll keep you posted as any crazy stories happen from that. But I really appreciate you guys listening. As usual, there's an email address in the email if you want to reach out and send me a line. But yeah, those are the 2 crazy things that happened. Hope that helped. Can't wait to talk to you guys again soon. Make sure you're reading their Bibles and getting closer to God as best you can. As always, thanks again for being here this week, guys. Look forward to catching you all again soon. And just a reminder, I do put out another podcast. It's a weekly one about defense news. It's called The View from the Front. I put that out once a week, every Thursday. And, I really do care about our country. I obviously served in uniform as a Marine, and I do care about our military. But I put that out each week as a way to help influence and guide young men and women who are deployed around the world, and also older vets who did their time but still love the military. I end each of those episodes talking about God because if we're being dead honest, I care about our country, I care about our military, but I care more about God and the kingdom work I feel like I've been called to do. So the defense podcast is partly bait so that I might plant a seed or two for some soul out there that needs it. And I know, thinking about to my time when I served, I would have loved to had a godly and also relevant weekly podcast that I could keep up with. So that's what I put out every week. So if you haven't ever checked that out, you can check it out. Again, it's called The View from the Front, and you can search that out on any channel with my name, Stan R. Mitchell, and it should pop up. Also, just a reminder, I have written 12 books. They've been pretty successful. I've been blessed to have sold 70,000 copies, and I promise, even though I live in Tennessee, I do not have that many cousins. But I did want to mention one of them, Little Man and the Dickson County War. It's a Western, very fast-paced. It does have a bit of a Christian angle to it at the end. I've rewritten part of it. So if you're a person of faith and you want to buy a book for someone, that one has a Christian angle, no dirty language, nothing like that. But it is a fun shoot 'em up, really good story. It's done pretty well. I'm very proud of that book. And then finally, if you wish, you can also support the show through several different ways. All of the details are in the episode notes, but you can subscribe through Substack for $5 per month. You can subscribe through Patreon if you've ever heard of that website for $5 per month. You can even send a tip through Venmo or PayPal. Again, as you guys probably have picked up on, I have been blessed in this life to be a creator. I love writing. I love doing podcasts. I actually want to do a third podcast in the future that's based on politics from a moderate perspective. But again, it would be just like the Defense News podcast. The politics would mainly be there to, although I do care about politics, and I do want to be a unifier for our country, and I do think that's needed, I would end each episode by talking about God, because the politics would ultimately be there as bait, because I want to plant seeds for God. And as you guys probably guessed, I do work a full-time job, so I try to squeeze all of this stuff in as I can. But long-term, I would love to be a full-time creator again, if that is God's will. And you can help me get there if you'd like, only if you feel like you want to. As the Bible teaches, God loves a generous giver. Do not help, support, or do any of those things because you feel pressured to. You don't owe me anything. You can listen to all this stuff for free. God will provide the way if it's meant to be His will. I think that's pretty much everything, guys. Again, thanks for listening. If you haven't dropped a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening, you can do that as a way to help the show grow and teach the algorithms that this is good content. Hey, have a great week until we talk again soon. Stay strong in the faith. And as always, this is not about me. To God be the glory.